Fox Valley Memory Project, Dementia Capable Community Training. Thank you so much for joining us today for this Dementia Capable training. My name is Christy Millar, and my partner here, Sarah Swant, and we're both resource navigators with Fox Valley Memory Project. So our learning objectives for today is, what is dementia? What are the different signs and symptoms of dementia? The most common types, and then the sensory changes that go along with dementia. If you take a look here at the Wisconsin's aging population graph, the first one here in 2015, you can see that the majority of the Fox Valley was, percentage of age 65 or above. We were generally a pretty young community. By 2035, however, our 4 counties here, Outagamie, Winnebago, Calumet, Wapaka counties, you can see that by 2035, we will be aging quite a bit. And the reason this is important is because one of the main precursors for dementia will be advancing age. So we want to just take a look at how our community is changing and be aware that as we age, our chances for dementia rise as well. Here's a nice graph of 2022 Alzheimer's disease facts and figures. 1 out of 3 seniors dies with Alzheimer's or another form of dementia. And more than 80% of Americans know little or are not familiar with mild cognitive impairment, which can be an early stage of Alzheimer's. So what is dementia? Dementia really is a group of symptoms associated with a decline in memory and thinking skills severe enough to impair a person's everyday activities. Dementia is progressive. It's progressive impairment in the memory, language, judgment, and abstract thinking. So if we take a look at this, we've got a nice little umbrella here with the term dementia, and that really is a great way to look at dementia. So dementia is an umbrella term that describes a collection of symptoms that are caused by disorders affecting the brain. It's not one specific disease, but it can affect thinking, behavior, and the ability to perform everyday tasks. Brain function is affected enough to interfere with the person's normal social or working life. So if you take a look at underneath the umbrella, we'll have several of the most common forms of dementia, Alzheimer's disease being the most common form, with 40 to 70% of dementias. And then the next one would be vascular dementia, and that's the second most common type of dementia. Typically that occurs with things like a stroke or impaired blood supply to the brain, hardening of arteries, all of those kind of diseases that can lead to vascular dementia. Lewy body dementia accounts for approximately 2 to 20% of all dementias. This is a really interesting form of dementia because it can have some of the similarities of Alzheimer's disease, except for the hallucinations that come along with Lewy body. It can be much more frightening to the person experiencing them. And you'll also have days where a person with Lewy body disease can seem very much cognitively strong one day, be able to chat, talk just fine. Memory is not impaired, so to say, with this kind of dementia. But then the next day, they may have a lot of problems with staying awake throughout the day. They may have a lot more falls, really kind of shuffling their steps when they walk. And then also the medications that a person would take for your common dementias like Alzheimer's are actually affected much more with Lewy body. So you see a negative effect of the medications typically used for dementias when a person has Lewy body disease. Frontal temporal dementia accounts for 2 to 4% of all dementias. And this one typically affects people in their mid to late 50s is when you start to see this. And it really can inhibit a person's ability to do those socially acceptable things. So you might see somebody doing something that would just be totally unacceptable so in social environments. And with this form of dementia, there's just no filter really to be able to stop themselves from doing these things. Other kind of dementias can be dementias associated with Parkinson's disease, Huntington's disease, head trauma, HIV, alcohol-related dementia, and other progressive supranuclear palsy dementias as well. In this next video, we're going to take a look at a family's account of their journey through Alzheimer's disease with both of their parents. And as you're listening to this, just really pay attention to some of the key things that the family is going to talk about as far as how they loved their parents well through this, the different changes in personality that they saw with their parents, and just how they journeyed through this with them.
I'm Alice Wright Stevens, and we lost our mom 3.5 years ago to Alzheimer's, and now we're watching our dad suffer with symptoms.
It was a real challenge to see our mom have Alzheimer's all the way to her death, and now our father is battling it as well.
I would describe her as terrifically energetic, very fun to be around, a driving force for our family, as so many moms are. And she was always inclusive, always wanted to make sure everybody who could be would be included in on the fun and the adventure and the trip.
About a year before she died, we were out eating lunch and talking about family, and she looked at me and asked me, she said, "Now, who are you?" And I looked at her and I said, "Mama, I'm Alice, your daughter." I just wanted to grab her and pull her close to me. But I also knew she was going away.
We didn't know what was going on, and we were frustrated and confused because it was just so opposite of the kind of person that we were reared by.
There was a definite telltale sign at the church one day. Dad went up there to have a meeting, and Mom started walking around the church, and that's when Ann, Bryant's wife, got very concerned.
Well, she was found in the parking lot, and our church, the front of it is a very busy road, and that obviously alarmed all of us because she could have wandered out into that road. I think all these symptoms we're talking about, we just realized we had to get some help.
We went to Emory and had testing, and they did an MRI, and that was the most graphic thing that I saw to understand. It showed Mom's brain, and one side was just black, and the other side looked like brain matter. And he said, "This is where the cells are dying."
There was a strong sense of denial on Mom's part. She did not want to even accept anything that the doctors were saying, and that was heartbreaking. We realized it was happening, but she just didn't want to deal with it.
Looking back, I could sense that she was probably struggling because she wasn't able to process what was being discussed and talked about. And she got terribly angry, just really, raised her voice and all that. And that was just, it was shocking because that was never the way that she was.
That was doubly sad in that last 6 months because Alzheimer's not only affects the mind, it begins to affect the whole body. And to see that happening to your mom, who has been the picture of beauty and elegance, was very difficult to see.
But that was the taxing time for me, the last 3 years of just watching that great lady disappear. right before my eyes. She was right there, but she was.
One afternoon, exhausted at work, but I just felt like I needed to stop by there, and got there, and it was dinner time. They often would start about 4:30, 4:45 for dinner, and she couldn't swallow. She didn't know how to bring the spoon or fork to her mouth. I realized that was it. And sure enough, within a couple of weeks, she was gone.
We really didn't think Dad had it. It's just Mom was gone and he's absent-minded.
If someone is to come see him, he could have known him the whole life, but he's probably struggling with who they are. But the great thing about Dad is he's going to act like he knows who you are.
He does say our names to my face, but he can't remember Alice, Scott, and Bryant's name sometime.
And he's got 24/7 care. We have 3 men that rotate and are there with him, but whoever is with him that particular moment, he can't tell you their name for the life of them.
Early on, we were trying to help them, remember things right. But as a family member, after a while, you just listen. You just don't try to correct. Just let them. Yeah. When you've got 2 parents that are diagnosed with Alzheimer's, it is a haunting fear to the 4 of us to know. And when I can't remember the name of somebody I know, what instantly comes into your brain is, oh my goodness. I just would encourage others that are dealing with that even though all of us are selfish and we may want to just avoid it and not deal with it, loving our parents to the very end, I just still believe they're going to sense that love, even when they can't talk, even when they can't even recognize us, they can sense that we love them.
The sobbing of watching her leave was cruel, but at the same time, what a great relationship we had and a great life we had with her. So I look back at her life and say, no regrets.
Okay, so the 10 warning signs would be memory loss that disrupts daily life. Okay, this is more than just forgetting where your keys are. It's memory loss that's going to really disrupt everyday living. Your challenges in planning or solving problems. So things that you would typically be able to think through and kind of problem solve. A person with dementia now is not going to be able to do that any longer. Confusion with time or place. So if you're noticing a loved one is confused with the time frame, so they're thinking that they need to get back home to wait for the kids to get home from school, and they're in their 80s, and obviously their kids are grown and not coming home from school. So confusion with that, confusion with time or place, or wanting to go home when they are at the home that they've been living at for the last 40 years. Difficulty doing familiar tasks at home, work, or leisure. So if you're noticing that a loved one is having a hard time writing out a check or paying the bills, or maybe even making a meal, something that they've done every day for the last several years, they're now struggling with those sequencing of events and how to do things. Trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. So this one is interesting because, sometimes families will say, well, my mom is just having a really hard time with seeing, even though she has her glasses. Like she goes to reach for something and completely misses the table, or she walks into things. And this can be a common sign of somebody that is struggling with those early warning signs of dementia. The next one's a new problem with words while speaking or writing. So really having a hard time pulling up words to make a sentence that makes sense, or having a hard time finding the correct word for naming different objects. Misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps. So all of us misplace our keys, right? But a person with dementia is not going to be able to kind of sit back and say, okay, when I came in from the house, I went into the restroom and then I went to the kitchen, and really kind of retrace those steps. What we end up seeing is a person that can't retrace their steps will try to fill in the blanks with somebody stole my item, somebody else moved it, and really some of this paranoia kind of starts to jump in as well. Decreased or poor judgment. So really this comes into play where people might get into some kind of become a victim of some kind of financial fraud, where somebody's calling them up and saying they need to send, $5,000 to get their grandson out of jail or something. So really not being able to think through, would that really happen? Would somebody really contact me for that? Withdrawal from work or social activities. When we just talked a few minutes ago about having that problem with finding words when speaking or writing, this really plays into your social abilities. So if you're having a hard time making sense while you're talking, and you're realizing that people are looking at you strangely, or friends seem concerned about you, and your ability to do the things that you've always done before is getting more and more difficult, it's pretty natural for somebody to want to kind of pull away from social situations. And then changes in mood and personality is often prevalent in dementia. So just like in the previous video that we watched, we saw how the daughter was explaining that, the mom was having a hard time coming to terms with her diagnosis, and was just getting angry about it. And that was something that typically she never really had that kind of mood or personality changes before. And so that can be a common thing to see in a person with those early warning signs of dementia. Okay, in the next video, we're going to dive into a little bit on what is Alzheimer's specifically and how that affects the brain. So we'll take a look at this video and talk a little bit about it in just a second.
What is Alzheimer's disease? Alzheimer's is a slow, fatal disease of the brain affecting 1 in 10 people over the age of 65. No one is immune. The disease comes on gradually as 2 abnormal protein fragments called plaques and tangles accumulate in the brain and kill brain cells. They start here in the hippocampus, the part of the brain where memories are first formed. Over many years' time, the plaques and tangles slowly destroy the hippocampus, and it becomes harder and harder to form new memories. Simple recollections from a few hours or days ago that the rest of us might take for granted are just not there. After that, more plaques and tangles spread into different regions of the brain, killing cells and compromising function wherever they go. This spreading around is what causes the different stages of Alzheimer's. From the hippocampus, the disease spreads here to the region of the brain where language is processed. When that happens, it gets tougher and tougher to find the right word. Next, the disease creeps toward the front of the brain, where logical thought takes place. Very gradually, a person begins to lose the ability to solve problems, grasp concepts, and make plans. Next, the plaques and tangles invade the part of the brain where emotions are regulated. When this happens, the patient gradually loses control over moods and feelings. After that, the disease moves to where the brain makes sense of things it sees, hears, and smells. In this stage, Alzheimer's wreaks havoc on a person's senses and can spark hallucinations. Eventually, the plaques and tangles erase a person's oldest and most precious memories, which are stored here in the back of the brain. Near the end, the disease compromises a person's balance and coordination. And in the very last stage, it destroys the part of the brain that regulates breathing and the heart. The progression from mild forgetting to death is slow and steady and takes place over an average of 8 to 10 years. It is relentless and, for now, incurable. Helping your family, friends, and neighbors to better understand Alzheimer's will reduce stigma, improve care, and even help the fight for a cure. Thanks for helping to do your part.
Okay, so we're going to take a look at the difference between dementia and delirium. The symptoms can definitely be similar, and when you're out in the community and possibly coming across a person that is needing your assistance, you're going to want to take a look at, is this person possibly experiencing dementia, or are we dealing with some other kind of medical emergency such as delirium? So with delirium, this is something that begins suddenly and develops quickly. It has definitely a defined starting point when somebody starts seeing these symptoms. The symptoms of delirium are temporary and reversible. You might see a difficulty with attention as the main early noticeable symptom, and slurred speech is common during delirium episodes. With dementia, however, you're going to see symptoms beginning gradually and progress over time. A person may have an uncertain beginning point to their symptoms. The symptoms are permanent and worsen as the disease progresses. They may have difficulty remembering recent events in the main early noticeable symptoms. And speech problems consist of trouble putting thoughts into words, forgetting words, or repeating words.
Hello. Today we're going to be taking a look at some sensory changes in dementia. When we think of dementia, we often just think of memory loss. And although this is a really big part of the disease, the damage to the brain that affects memory can also affect other things, including our senses. Now let's start by taking a look at changes to vision. To cope with poor processing capacity, the visual field narrows to reduce the amount of stimuli. This results in very limited peripheral vision. Another way the brain copes with limited processing capacity is by using monocular vision, so just using one eye. This affects depth perception, so it's not uncommon to see people with dementia failing to pick up objects or not quite reaching in the right place. Monocular vision also affects the way we process speed and movement. Even if approached at a normal pace, it can seem to a person with dementia that someone has just suddenly appeared in front of them. Another difficulty can occur over pattern recognition. Especially patterns involving lines or dots can be interpreted as moving, or interpreted wrongly, such as a circle pattern on the floor being confused for a hole. Dementia can also affect the way a person interprets sound. Damage to areas of the brain which process auditory information may limit a person's ability to understand long or fast-spoken sentences. People with dementia can also become hypersensitive to noise, meaning they can be easily startled by sudden or loud noises. They can also have difficulty filtering sound, resulting in noisy rooms becoming overwhelming. It could sound something like this.
I think it would be good to get dressed in a minute.
The next thing we're going to talk about is smell. People with dementia often suffer from olfactory hallucinations, smelling things which aren't there. The most commonly reported ones are burning rubber or toast. This can be distressing, giving a lack of orientation in a restricted environment. It is also common for things to start smelling different, less appealing, or overwhelming, causing a change in appetite. Another thing that affects appetite is changes in taste. Loss of taste buds alters how people experience food and may result in people no longer liking the foods that they used to enjoy. Finally, it's important to think about changes in touch. Some areas of the body become hypersensitive, while other areas become hyposensitive. Typically, the mouth, palms of hands, soles of feet, and genitalia become hypersensitive, with people reporting greater tenderness in these regions. Even water from a shower can feel painful. Conversely, limbs become hyposensitive, with people reporting less sensation in these areas. This can increase the risk of injury, as people may hurt and even bruise themselves and not realize. So that was a brief overview of some of the sensory changes you can expect to see in people with dementia. Thanks for watching, and we hope you enjoyed it.
Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about are communications and feelings. We're going to learn about understanding communication challenges for people with dementia, because as everything we've talked about before with all the sensory changes, that's going to make communication different and more difficult as well. Developing effective communication and detective skills, understanding behaviors as communication, and communicating with empathy and respect. So how we communicate, so how all of us communicate, it's very little to do with the words that we're saying. So 7% of how we communicate is actually words. 38% is the tone of voice, modulation, and pauses that we use. And then 55% is body language and facial expression. So with someone with dementia, they are going to rely really heavily on watching body language and facial expression and listening to the tone of the voice, not so much the words that you're saying. Some communication challenges that people with dementia have are remembering and understanding words, thinking rationally, losing their filter and social settings, speaking logically and following instructions, responding to questions, identifying location and type of pain, providing a history of illness, and simple motor skills may be forgotten. So what can we do as members of the community to help people with dementia when we're communicating with them? We can use their name if we know it. If we can use their first name, that'll typically be the last thing that they'll forget. So use their name when you're talking to them, make eye contact, even before you address them, to give them the visual cue that you're going to be talking to them. Beginning a conversation more socially might be helpful. If you run into someone and they're needing help, asking them how they are, getting to know them a little bit before trying to help might make them more comfortable. Speaking slowly and clearly is going to be really helpful. As Christy talked about earlier, the processing is going to be more difficult for them. So slow down your speech and simplify it. Using simple words and phrases, providing limited choices. So instead of saying, where do you need to go? Say, do you need to go here or somewhere else? Try to give 2 choices. Controlling the setting is helpful. As the video talked about, it can be overwhelming to have background noises and other things going on that can make it harder for them to process. Pause and allow time for the person to respond. We are all very uncomfortable with pauses and silence, but we need to make sure to give them time to process what you've said and then figure out how they're going to respond to it. And you want to repeat, if you need to repeat, you want to use the exact same words because they're likely still working on processing through the words you used the first time. Other communication strategies we talked about, so they rely heavily on nonverbal communication, conveying a calmness in your tone of voice, your gestures and expressions. You want to break requests down into steps and use visual cues if you can. So 1 step at a time. Turning negatives into positives and just reassuring. So making sure that you're trying to let them know it's going to be okay and make them be comfortable and try to be as calm as you can. So some strategies that you can use is approaching them from the front, because like the video was talking about, their peripheral vision might not be as good as it used to be. They might not be able to see you. So you want to approach them from the front so you don't startle them. Getting eye level with them so you're not hovering over them. Smiling And if you're comfortable, if you know them, offering your hand just to give them some comfort. And one thing we talk about a lot is that if you can make someone feel like they're cared about and you'll help them, what you're saying isn't as important as what you're doing or how you're making them feel. So a Maya Angelou quote, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So you might have to be a detective when you're working with people with dementia because they might not be able to tell you what's wrong. So we have to kind of figure it out using other ways. What are they trying to tell me? So listen for descriptive words instead of specific names. So they might not remember the word banana, but if they're using other words to describe it, like yellow fruit, you can guess. You can say, do you mean banana or something else? And then you can go from there. Nonverbal cues such as facial expressions, pacing, or holding a body part can indicate pain or discomfort. They might not be able to tell you that they have to go to the bathroom or that they hurt themselves. They might not remember or know what happened anymore. So we have to be a detective to figure that out. I want to go home is pretty common, like Christy said, even if they are home. Saying I want to go home doesn't necessarily mean that they're thinking of a specific place, but more likely the feeling of comfort that they're looking for. So trying to figure out what it is that they need and then trying to help them get that. And we try to think of behaviors as communication. So typically, it's either a physical need that needs to be met or a social emotional need that needs to be met. So we got to figure out what that is. So we start with the physical needs. Are they hungry? Are they thirsty? Are they cold? Are they hot? Are they tired? Did they hurt themselves? Those are all things they might not be able to tell you. So we have to figure it out. Unmet social or emotional needs. They could be bored. This might be somebody that is used to helping people, doing a lot of things during the day, and now they're just kind of sitting in front of the TV. They might be overstimulated. They might need a break from the commotion and noise that is happening in their living situation. They might feel lonely. They might feel like they lack purpose now, and they want something to do to feel worthwhile. And another thing is they might be feeling confused because of complicated requests from other people.
And what we need to know, what everybody needs to learn how to do is de-escalate people. But guess what that requires you to be able to do? Communicate effectively. Because now I have somebody in acute distress. Unless you know how to take them down verbally and non-verbally, all you're going to do is increase their distress, which is typically what happens, which is why they end up with the EMS people strapped them down to the gurney and have to drug them up, quote unquote, because they reach maximum crisis. I walked in on a Saturday into a building one time. I was there to train staff, but nobody was in the place I was supposed to do training. And I heard down the hall, no, you're going to know why I'm telling you. And I thought, well, I bet I know where everybody is. And I went down the hall because, of course, when there's a racket, everybody wants to check it out. And so everybody was down there checking out the racket. Basically, everybody was supposed to be in my class, I suspect. And there was a woman backed into a corner, and there were 4 EMS folks who were trying to move in on her. And staff said, "This is what we're talking about. She gets totally out of control." And they were all saying, "Calm down. Now turn to your partner. I want you to do this one. This one's a really popular one. Do this. Calm down. I need you to calm down. Calm down." And I said, gentlemen, stop. Come here. I will handle this. I'm an expert. Now I'm going, oh crap. I hope I can do this. But what did I know if I chose not to do it? She was already flinging her arms around. She had a cut on her arm from where she flung against the edge of the wall, and it sliced her skin because she was 89 years old. She was terrified. She was fighting them off, but she missed them and hit the wall because she didn't have depth perception. She was crouching down. She was trying to find things to throw. It was just going to get worse and worse. And I said, enough, time. And I pulled everybody back and I said, you guys back off, quit watching. Not a show. And they were all like, And then they hid so they could watch. I know what they did. Fortunately, I just got enough out of her range and I didn't really care. And I said, what's her name? And they said, Millie. And I said, Millie, all these people, every one of them is coming at you. Now, notice what I did. That's Millie. And I turned this way. Who's on Millie's side? I am. And I did what she was trying to do, only I was her champion. None of them. No, you get out of here. All you people, leave her alone. Oh, Millie. Oh, man, I can't believe I did this. Oh, God, are you okay? I got those bumps. Yeah, because what do you want to do right now? What are you planning on doing right now? Well, absolutely taking my hand. Oh, my God, I cannot believe this has happened. Oh, are you okay? Oh, God. Millie. Good. There we go. There we go. Here you go. Here you go. You're okay. It's okay. You're okay. I'll deal with them. Come on. Let's go sit down a minute. Come on. We'll be okay. So she got up. I had her walk over to the gurney, sit down on the gurney. I helped her lie down on the gurney. I said, I'm going to put this strap here to hold you on. Okay. Okay, she said, yeah, put it on. And I said, now I'm going to do one down here because I don't want your legs to come off. Okay, but I put the blanket up real high because you're cold. Why was she cold? Her anxiety was so high, she was freezing. She was freezing because she'd just been through this horrible incident. And so what happened is I said, here, come on, I'm going to hug you. I'm going to hold your hand. And I walked out with her. She got in the emergency vehicle, no problem whatsoever. And I'm like, how did you do that? Were y'all watching? I was willing to go where she was. She was a terrified, trapped person. And what they didn't realize is they were making it worse in their effort to help because they're trained to do what they're trained to do, which is transport people emergently. And some of them go further and they've got more skill, but that's not what their job is until we make it their job. Your job is to help people who have dementia.
Okay, so we like that Tipa Snow video. We don't love how she talks about the EMS personnel that were there, but we want you to take away the steps because it is helpful. So removing the threat and then creating space to make them feel not threatened. Be on their side. Get at or below eye level. You can use hand under hand to get them calmed down and breathe in sync to calm them down. Use a calm voice, relax your body, help them relax theirs, attend to needs that they have, and be willing to go where they are. So how to help someone with dementia feel safe? Approach them with a compassionate manner, validate their feelings. So instead of trying to say, this isn't happening, I don't know what you're talking about, everything's fine, you can say, so I'm hearing you're feeling like this. I'm so sorry. That must feel so scary. What can we do? How can I help you? Be present where they are. Don't try to correct. Tell them that it's a different time or place. That's not going to be helpful. Meet them where they are. Use positive reassurance to questions, even if they're asking them repetitively. They just need that reassurance. Be aware of your volume and tone, because we tend to raise our voices when we're talking with older people so that they can hear us. That can feel like we're yelling at them, though. So just be aware of that and respond with empathy and respect, no matter what they're going through. And don't argue. That's not going to help. Trying to reason or logic isn't going to be helpful for either of you.
Okay, so for part 3, we're going to talk about how we can create a dementia-friendly community. We want to look at how to give compassionate assistance to somebody that is experiencing dementia out in the community. Patience and friendliness can go a really long way, as we will see in one of the upcoming videos. And then what we can do if we notice that somebody seems lost. In this next video that we're going to watch, we're going to see an account of a lady that is experiencing dementia and what that looks like when she goes about her day. And I want to just have you pay close attention to how the people around her are responding to her. Take a look at things like body language or tone of voice.
Tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock here on 107.9 FM.
Right.
What? I forgot. Should I?
Just
I
go
put-
sit down. Just
Oh.
go sit down.
Yeah. Right. Oh, that way. I don't watch. Oh, I don't know. Ah. Ah. Would you? Oh. The list. I do. Yes, I don't know quite what. Oh dear. Chicken cheese. What? Chicken cheese? Sorry. Oh. Oh. People with dementia have experiences like this every day. A little bit of understanding, tolerance, and patience can make all the difference.
I'll tell you what. If you go into the seats just there,
Right.
when we get there, I'll call you, okay?
Okay, madam. I can't get on.
Let me help you this way.
Thank you.
Can I look at that list?
Yes.
Chicken and cheese.
Oh,
Let's go this way.
thank you.
Okay, so I really like that video because it really does give you a pretty good idea of what a person with dementia might be experiencing when they're just going out in the community trying to go about their day, and how a little bit of compassion and understanding out in the community can really help them lead a more independent life for much longer. So imagine yourself with this brain disease feeling lost and confused. How would you want people to approach you? So just remember some simple things that you could say would be, how can I help you? Our customers are very important here. Or, these things happen and it's okay. Really, we want them to feel comfortable and valued out in the community. If you are approaching somebody in the community that seems like they may be lost, one of the things that you could do is really calmly approach the person and try to start a conversation to build some trust. Try to get any information that you can from them as far as driver's license, name, and address. And if you can get information on family or friends, go ahead and give them a call to get them connected with loved ones. I'm sure as officers, you have run across this in the past with somebody wandering away from home, and I'm sure that you're very well aware of how to approach someone and assist somebody with getting back to where they need to be.
All right. The next thing we're going to talk about are dementia-friendly environments, and how to create them and make sure that your environment is going to be the best for people with dementia. So changing the environment can improve independence. Making small changes can have big effects, and safety checks we're going to talk about. Physical environment considerations. What looks normal to us may be perceived a different way by a person with dementia. So like that sensory video I talked about, a rug with a dark spot on it could look like a hole. Flooring transitions can be challenging. Glaring floor surfaces, monochrome decorating can be confusing. If everything is one color, it can be hard to tell things apart. Wayfinding. So consider using arrows or landmarks to guide. Provide an escort to the location if necessary or possible. Is your environment accessible? So the one on the left is a good example of a helpful environment for people. So handrails are a different color, so they're easy to find. And the sitting room sign with a clear picture and large font. The one on the right could be better. It's all basically one color. And so it's difficult to tell furniture apart because it all looks the same. Little changes you could make. Opening the blinds in the home during the day for additional natural light. Decluttering for easy movement. And calming visual environment. Turn off background noise such as TV and radio when you're trying to complete tasks. When they're trying to complete tasks or follow instructions. Ensure appropriate lighting in the evening. Home safety. As dementia progresses, safety considerations may need to be made for safe living at home. Area rugs can be trip hazards. Securing doors to basement stairs. So if there are stairways that aren't safe anymore, you can lock them or put something in front of it so that's not easy for them to use if it's not safe anymore. Removing firearms from the home, having medication dispensers, and talking about driving issues. So
Yeah, so sometimes a person still is out driving, even though they've been diagnosed with dementia. And so sometimes families really need to start having that conversation. Let's say dad has gone for a drive to go get something from the store and has forgotten how to get back. And family members are calling you because they haven't seen their loved one in hours. And so I guess preparing family members for the possibility of having a driver's license suspended, or talking to a loved one about the possibility of having to remove the vehicle from the premises, because it's going to get to a point when that vehicle and driving is going to be more of a safety issue than it's worth having there.
And also keeping in mind bathroom safety. So grab bars, shower chairs, make sure the lighting is good in the bathroom. So just making sure that you're as safe in the bathroom as you can be. So wandering statistics. Wandering is a big issue in dementia. 78% of people with dementia will wander. Wandering is considered an emergency. If not found within 24 hours, 50% of people risk injury, serious injury, or death. Wandering happens on foot, by car, or other forms of transportation.
Project Lifesaver is something that you are probably aware of because the Winnebago County Sheriff has enacted this program, Project Lifesaver, which started with the Oshkosh Police Department, but has gone out through all of Winnebago County. So you're probably well aware of this. This is a technology that is available to all of Winnebago County. And I probably don't have to go into a lot of detail of it because I'm sure you're quite familiar with it, but this is something that if we were working with families in Winnebago County and they were concerned about their loved one with dementia wandering away from home, this is definitely something that we would let them know is available for them. And we're just really excited to have this available to families in the Winnebago County area.
And it's important for us to know that when we are taking calls for service, we're typically going to be dealing with people that are still in their home. In fact, 80% of people with dementia live at home. Now, this could be alone or it could be with a caregiver or family member. But the majority of folks that we're going to encounter with dementia do live at home. So we could be called to their house or we could be called out in the community on a variety of different situations to assist that person. Important also to know that when people do move to a facility setting, it's usually because their care has gone beyond what the means are within their home. And this is going to be in the later stages or the last few years of life. It's also important to know that if we are getting called to a facility, most times that's going to be because someone has gotten combative. We're not going to get called to a facility when things are going okay and somebody becomes a little bit confused or isn't recognizing someone. We're going to get called when there's a higher concern, whether it's concern for that person's safety or the safety of the staff at that facility. Now we'll talk about Chapter 51 versus Chapter 55 as it relates to persons with dementia. As we just spoke about people living in facilities versus living at home, obviously the higher amount of people are living in their own homes. So but when it comes to a request for a 51 or a 55, most often we're going to be called to a facility. A lot of times we'll get called because somebody has become combative or difficult to handle, and there's a concern for safety to that person or the others around them. But we can get called to a home as well. A lot of times family caregivers or in-home caregivers may come across a challenging behavior. It may also be a combative type behavior, or it may just simply be that this person is experiencing challenging behaviors from their loved one with dementia that they can no longer handle on their own. Now, when we get into these situations, or when we get called to respond to these situations, we want to know that a Chapter 51 placement is not appropriate for someone with dementia. A Chapter 51, as we know, is a mental health hold. And we know that those holds are for someone struggling with a mental illness that can benefit from going on a hold and receiving mental health treatment to help them stabilize and maintain their situation. Now, someone with dementia who's in middle or late stages is not going to benefit from a Chapter 51 hold in mental health treatment. Their condition is going to continue to decline, and their memory may be such that going in for treatment isn't going to be effective for them. So in either case, if we're called to a facility or a home, again, we want to know what the underlying issue is that's causing the behavior that warranted a call to police. Is there an underlying health issue? Is the person going through untreated pain? Is it something as simple as being hungry, thirsty, or overheated? This is where we need to do a little bit of detective work, make sure we're talking to the caregiver or care partner and find out what might be causing the behavior that got us called there. and help them work through that situation, because a lot of times it's a very temporary reaction to something that's going on, and we can assist them in working through that. The last alternative that you're going to look into is a protective placement, which would be a Chapter 55. There is a facility at Mercy in Oshkosh that has a geriatric unit. And sometimes this can be an option in different situations. But again, it's a last option, and you're going to want to consult with Adult Protective Services when moving forward with something like that. And for us to reach Adult Protective Services, we would contact them through our local county crisis line. So we'll call our crisis number and request to be connected with Adult Protective Services.
A quick example is at a local facility here, there was an individual who was showing some very difficult behaviors to the staff. And he was sleeping during the day and staying up all night and wanting to wander throughout the facility. And it was disturbing his eating habits. He was becoming irritable, somewhat combative. The solution was, though, as they dug into the background, they found out that he spent most of his life as a night watchman. So they readjusted their schedule they actually set up a way to allow him to get meals in the evening. He slept all day still, and they let him safely move around a secured part of the facility, and that totally de-escalated the combative, the frustration, the behaviors that this individual was showing. So again, it's an example of going to where the person is in their journey of dementia, rather than trying to necessarily force them into something that is totally illogical to them based on the changes that have happened to their brain.
After discussing the Chapter 51 and Chapter 55 and thinking about transferring appropriately for individuals with dementia, transferring them to a hospital emergency room in the middle of a crisis situation that they are in their mind can be very traumatic. And so the goal of preventing transfer trauma is de-escalating the situation in place. So how can we problem solve to de-escalate the individual where we do not need to remove them from the environment into a different environment? Now, saying that, you may need to remove them from the immediate environment into a different room, a different hallway, maybe in the car for a drive. That is what we mean by de-escalation in place. We need to look at black box warnings on antipsychotics. Those are very important to know and understand, as well as when you do come into a situation, looking at their medications and asking what their medication regimen looks like. Have they missed any medication? And what are those medications? And if they have a black box warning, looking into that more deeply. And then also the saying of the deep end is a small number of people. Someone might just be having a hard moment, or like Mike's example that he just gave, if it's a routine thing and it's happening on a routine basis, then we need to look into their life history, their past history, their occupation, or what may be causing that behavior. And is it truly a behavior, or is it just a routine that they're getting back to that we are not understanding? So looking to prevent transfer of the individuals is very important as professionals, because an individual with dementia, if they are transferred and experience trauma during that transfer, their progression of dementia can be fast forwarded and can be pretty detrimental to that individual. Now, coming into a situation where you may feel like you need to transfer the individual because of the intensity of the situation and a caregiver involved in that situation where they just can't deal anymore. It just seems as though it may not be the individual with dementia, but the caregiver and their burnout status. Caregiver burnout is very real, especially today with the pandemic going on. We need to be very mindful of that if we are coming among a situation with an individual with dementia and their caregiver. Not only paying attention to that individual with living the journey of dementia, but also that caregiver. Have they had a loss of interest in activities that they previously enjoyed? Are they feeling irritable, hopeless, and helpless? Are they depressed? Are they emotionally, physically exhausted? They have a very higher risk of cardiovascular issues and depression. And are they they're prone to excessive use of alcohol and or sleep medication. So therefore, there could be some underlying issues with that caregiver as well that is contributing to their reaction of the situation with a person with a dementia. A lot of times caregiver burnout can be detrimental to their health, and we can see a decline of health in the caregiver faster than the decline of dementia symptoms in the individual living the journey of dementia. And so therefore we need to give her resources and have the caregivers take care of themselves so they can take care of their loved one.
So it's important to remember when dealing with someone with dementia and their caregiver, that caregiver burnout is a real concern for someone caring for someone in their home. So it's important for us to not assume that just because it's adults involved in this situation, that they're adequately connected to resources. Make sure we take the time to figure out what's going on our calls that we respond to, and find out how the person with dementia is doing, but also ask that caregiver how they're doing and see if there's an opportunity there to link them with some resources. Also be mindful that situations of caregiver burnout can sometimes turn into abuse and neglect. So somebody being in a caregiver position could be incredibly taxed in their situation, and even well-intended persons could fall into situations of abuse and neglect to their loved one. So we also need to be mindful of that and make sure that the caregiving that's happening is appropriate. And also another very good reason to make sure that we're asking how they're doing and linking them if we have that opportunity. Common calls that we as law enforcement respond to. We're going to go over several different types of calls, examples, and ways that we can handle those situations. So before we get into that, just want to go through some things that we should consider and remember when we're going into calls involving someone with dementia. So first, it's going to be at home or in a facility, possibly out in the community. And we want to consider the things that go along with that. If there is staff or family members or things to talk to in those situations. We also want to find out if there is a relative or caregiver we should be in communication with. They might be able to help us with different information as far as the person's diagnosis and their abilities. And we also want to talk to them about the situation and verify that they, have the resources that they need. We also want to consider what is the cognition of the person with dementia. Are they able to understand the conversations that we're having and process the things that we go through, and their level of communication, if they're effectively able to communicate back with us or not. We're going to want to gather historical and personal information about the person. That's going to help us, to kind of understand the situation better, the behaviors they might be exhibiting, and things like that. We also want to take the time in these situations to properly make an assessment. We want to slow down, figure things out, talk to people, and have a good understanding of the situation. So that way we can make appropriate referrals and communicate with the right people. So that way we can better serve these folks. So now we're going to talk about people with dementia who may have been victimized in some way. So first, I want you to think about a call for service that you may have responded to or that you're aware of where someone with dementia was victimized in some way. Now, after you've thought about that, We now want to go into realizing that people with dementia are more vulnerable to be victimized. First of all, because they may not process things easily. They're easier to take advantage of. And additionally, because the perpetrator may realize that it's going to be difficult for them to account for this and make a report of it. When you're dealing with someone with dementia who's been the victim of a crime, you want to make sure not to dismiss their abilities. You want to take the time, like I said on the previous slide, to make a good assessment of them and their abilities and talk to people that can verify what their abilities are with their memory and communication. So you may very well be able to get a good statement from this person. And you want to slow down, take your time, and work with that person through the process. Something we want to be mindful of is that the perpetrators in these situations oftentimes are someone who has a trusting relationship with that person. So it could be a relative or someone else that is known to them, and we need to be mindful of that. So an example that I can share that I worked on involved a woman with dementia who was receiving in-home care. She lived alone, and each day there was a caregiver that was assigned to be at her residence for a few hours throughout the day to help with cleaning, cooking, and running errands like going to the grocery store or picking things up for her. This person had access to her debit card to be able to go to the grocery store or to pick up items that she needed. And what happened was the son of this female monitored her finances, and he was able to see that at one point there were several ATM withdrawals, which was not common for his mother. She didn't ever withdraw cash from ATMs. If she needed a little bit of cash on hand, she'd go to the bank and do it that way. So this was odd to him that there were several withdrawals for a few $100s. So he brought it up to the caregiver, and she had a story that she gave in regards to this. And throughout the investigation, I ended up finding that she admitted to withdrawing the money, taking it herself, and she additionally admitted to when she would go to different stores, she would make personal purchases for herself as well. And so in this case, I coordinated a lot with the son who had access to the records and kind of knew his mom's financial spending habits. And additionally, I was able to work with the woman with dementia, and she was able to give statements that, you know, she confirmed that she did not make ATM withdrawals, and she confirmed things that were lies in the caregiver's story. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about driving situations. So again, I will ask at this time if you can recall an incident that you responded to or maybe assisted with that involved someone with dementia that was involved in a crash, a driving violation, or a situation where they may have been lost.
So they say it's the best seafood restaurant in town, and it's cheap.
You're taking me someplace cheap?
No, I'm taking you someplace good. Hey, watch it! Are you blind?
Juliet King 16. I'm gonna be late. Where is it?
Sir, do you know you ran a red light back here?
I'm looking for my sister's house.
Sir, you ran a red light and you almost hit 2 people back here. I need to see your license and registration.
I don't have time for this. I'm gonna be late.
Sir, I need to see your license and registration, please.
My sister, she's expecting me. She lives on Forest Hill.
That guy almost killed me.
Sir, I need you to step back. Sir, Sir, you're going the wrong way. Forest Hills is back this way.
No, it's right where it's always been, right down there.
Sir, why don't you shut your car off and step back here and speak to me? Sir. Sir, I need you to shut your car off and come back here and talk to me. Okay, sir. You come right back here. Right in the back here. Okay. Do you have your license with you? Are you Calvin Sands?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Sands, can you tell me again where you were trying to go?
To lunch at Karen's.
Who's Karen? Is she a relative of yours?
Yes, sir, my sister.
Okay. Can you tell me what today's date is?
What?
Can you tell me what today's date is?
With any traffic stop, when you're asking the occupant and the driver questions, you can tell if something's not right.
So it's through our questioning that we have to determine if it's a medical problem, a mental problem, if they're impaired for any number of reasons.
If you think the person that you stop may possibly have Alzheimer's or dementia, you want to ask simple questions such as, do they know the date? Do they know the time?
Can you tell me the day of the week?
He's drunk.
Sir, I asked you to step back.
That man does not need to be behind the wheel of a car.
Let's go, Ty.
He's a menace.
I'm not going to tell you again. You need to step back.
I can't find my sister's house.
Do you know your sister's phone number? Maybe we can give her a call.
Once they've determined that they've been stopped, they'll just start giving you the same answer. You explain to them the reason why you're stopping them, but they just keep telling you the same thing, such as, I'm trying to go to my daughter's house.
You know her address?
What do you have there, a locator device? Just give me a second, all right? Item 14 from base. Can you send FD to this location for an evaluation, please? Mr. Sands, we're going to help you find Karen.
Okay.
We'll do what we can at the scene, provide the medical attention, get the person home, follow up with family.
Cal, are you okay?
I'm sorry I'm late.
It's important to write a citation for the violation to create a paper trail in case that the person's license needs to be suspended.
In Massachusetts, we have a immediate threat form that we file with the Registry of Motor Vehicle that suspends the license of the operator until there can be a medical screen to make sure they can safely operate a vehicle. We also have an extensive database in our in-house computer system, so in our dealings in the future, the officers on the road will be aware of the patient's condition as soon as they roll up on scene.
We viewed that video, it had a lot of good information. First, I'll address the fact that they said that they stopped him for running a red light when we saw that it was a stop sign. Despite that, it was a really good video. It went over things that we need to consider when having an interaction with somebody for a driving violation during a crash or any time in a vehicle. Like they said, through the process of asking this gentleman questions, or anyone, you can make an assessment that something doesn't seem quite right. And through those questions, we can make a good assessment. In this case, he had a bracelet on, which was a tracking device. That's something that is possible that people may have that can also help alert us to something. People also wear different bracelets for Alzheimer's or dementia-related diagnoses, as well as, like we know, for people that are diabetic. So we can watch for those things. The other good things to keep in mind in these situations are to then contact a relative and write a citation. So that way there is that paper trail, like they suggested, that perhaps their driving is now being affected by their diagnosis. And in Wisconsin, the additional form that we want to fill out is the driver behavior report. So we can fill that out, explain the driving situation that we responded to, as well as any paperwork that was issued to the driver at that time. So that way there can be a good assessment on if they can continue driving. Also, they mentioned their in-house system, and in all of our calls that we respond to with someone with dementia, we can also make an in-house flag as well. So it's important on any of our calls, not only the driving ones, but if we're dealing with someone who has dementia, we can request the flag for that person for medical reasons, and then explain their diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever it may be. Next, we'll talk about responding to calls involving someone with dementia that has become combative. So when we get called to these situations, wherever it may be, we obviously want to use the methods that were gone over in the TIPA video that we watched a little while ago. You can kind of use those different methods to try to help calm someone down. And we want to consider in these types of situations the underlying reason for the behavior. Like we discussed before, all behavior is communication. So what might be going on? What can we do to change this person's situation to bring them out of that combative state? We also want to assess if there's medical treatment needed and what are the options and resources to this person. You know, if they're at home, if they haven't become combative before, you know, communicating with that caregiver, finding out a long-term plan, finding out if they need to be linked with resources, if they're in a care facility, you know, going over staff, you know, if their course of care or plan of care needs to change to meet this person's needs going forward. So again, you know, we want to try our best to avoid the transfer trauma and moving that person and just trying to get them back out of that combative state. Next, we're going to talk about people with dementia who have hallucinations and delusions. Again, I want you to take a moment to think about any calls for service you have responded to or are aware of involving someone with dementia who's experiencing hallucinations or delusions. I'm going to go over a couple of examples here. One was described to me in a training that I responded to. An officer from another agency talked about an instance where they were called to this home, and this woman believed that there were ghosts in the house, and she was terrified that they were around, and she had called the police for help. So we know that she called the police because she acknowledges what the police do and she wanted help. So the officer was able to go in there, address her concerns, and let her know that they were there to help. And the officer took the time to then get creative and went through the house and said that she had a tool that she was able to go through the house and remove the ghosts. So she walked through the house, talked to the woman, explained this situation, and the woman was content with that. Another example that our department has dealt with, and a couple of different officers have responded, is a female who had contacted the police department on a couple different occasions saying that a family, a couple parents, had responded to her house that she didn't know, and they left their small children with her. Now, this immediately sounds like a very concerning situation. Strangers just left their children with her. And in meeting with her and in going to her residence, it was found that these children were in fact stuffed animals that she was believing in her mind were real children. She was very well spoken, and looking through her house, it was well kept. You know, I was able to see things in the house that indicated at one time she was a corporate lawyer, that she, even in recent years, had been involved in endurance events like bicycle events or triathlons. And she was able to express herself very well, but clearly her mind was malfunctioning in a way that made her believe that these stuffed animals were children. And she would say things like, I want to feed them because they need nutrition, but their mouths are sewn shut. So she was recognizing this, but she still wasn't making that correlation or connection that these were not real children. And she talked about wanting to get car seats for them and asking what the regulations for this was, because she wanted to care for them in the best way that she could. And she expressed that it was causing her a lot of stress because she was getting older, and this was a difficult situation for her. Now, in talking to her, I was able to determine that she had a daughter. She only had one daughter, and she lived across the country. But I was able to make contact with the daughter and kind of verify that this was something that was going on with her, and she was in the process of getting a medical diagnosis, and doctors were working with her. And so I tried to figure out a way that we could work through the situation, because this had generated a couple of calls for service at this point that were similar. She had called a couple of times due to this concern. So I talked to the daughter and asked if it might be an option that, I discussed with her that perhaps I take the children and link them with Child Protective Services, so that way she no longer had to care for them. And I wanted to go over this with the daughter because I wasn't sure if this was something that would cause more harm than good, if it would bother her to have these stuffed animals removed. And the daughter thought it was a good idea and that we should give it a try. So I told her I'll collect the stuffed animals. I'll have them at the police department if ever she wants to get them. So I presented this plan to the woman, and she thought it was a great idea and wanted to make sure that they got help. So I removed these stuffed animals. And the daughter, continued to try to help her with care options. In both of these instances, officers went to that person's reality, and that's a really important theme in dementia care and response. When somebody is having a hallucination or delusion, there's not bringing that person out of that. There isn't bringing them back to our reality. We need to go there and help them feel safe and secure in that and help them navigate that situation. In both of these cases, we were able to do that. So get creative to help them get through that, and make sure you do a thorough assessment in those situations.
Just to add on to what Carrie had said, I had a personal experience where my mom, who lived in Ohio when I still live here in Wisconsin, was having delusions. She constantly thought she was potentially going to have a heart attack, and that got to the point where she thought every day she was having one. She started to call the 911 emergency that she was having this. Finally, one of the first responders got her to give her my name and phone number, and they called me, and I really appreciated that, because she literally had called 911 5 times in one day, thinking that she had a heart attack, but they could find no medical reason that she actually was, and she was suffering from dementia. So I was able to explain to the first responder that what my mom's situation was, and I was so glad that they called me, because I was able to try to help my mom through this. And so we did figure out a path forward to avoid these in the future. But getting that type of information so that the person can work with a family member to solve the problem is a really big step forward.
Thank you for sharing that, Mike. That's a really good point. And another thing that I'd like to reiterate. Now, there are several examples that we've given of someone who's living with dementia who is living alone. So they're navigating that. And in those cases, we need to know that just because that person is an adult, just because they're living on their own, does not mean that they are appropriately set up with resources. And we still need to try to figure out a contact point, a relative that we can communicate with to make them aware of the situation and to help them navigate that. Because it may be something that's going on that's new to the person, and their relatives aren't aware that this is something that's going on. So we need to make sure that we're making the effort to reach out. Next, we'll talk about calls involving someone with dementia who has wandered. So again, take a moment to think about any calls for service you have responded to or are aware of that involve someone with dementia who has wandered. Okay, so I'm sure all of us have responded to these situations. And first, I'm going to discuss a couple examples that APD has responded to. So a number of years ago, there was a gentleman on the south side who would commonly wander from home, go for a walk, and he would end up going back to the home that he had lived in for many years with his family. He had since moved out, and he would wander back to this home because it was familiar to him. There was since a young family that had moved in, and we were always able to get the gentleman home, but he would go back to this home that was familiar to him. Additionally, a little over a year ago, there was a female on the north side who was living with her adult son, and she had wandered sometime in the night. He worked night shift, and he got home in the morning, and she wasn't there. So she could have left really any time in basically an 8 or 9 hour span. And ultimately, we ended up putting out a silver alert for her. There had been a prior incident where she had wandered, again, from the north side of Appleton, and after a significant period of time, she was located in Larson, Wisconsin, which I don't know if you all are familiar. That's in between like the Neenah, Winneconne area. So this woman had wandered from the north side of Appleton to the Larson area, which is a significant distance. So she had a very significant past incident. And ultimately, after the silver alert was put out, there was a clothing description linked with that. There actually wasn't, unfortunately, a photo of this woman that had been taken in the last 30 years. They were a very modest means and didn't have any recent photos. But her clothing description was good enough that at the end of the day, she was located by Mead Pool. And in talking to her, she kind of described a few different places that she was, but I wasn't sure how good the descriptions were. But it was possible that she could have actually walked through the Neenah Menasha area, and she was gone for, possibly around 20 some hours. And this was in November. The weather was cold. And, in talking to her, she was able to have some conversation with you. But when you talk to her about, why she didn't stop somewhere and ask for directions, she couldn't explain to me exactly where she was trying to go. And she couldn't explain why she didn't ask for help to get back home. She was kind of in this OODA loop of just go, 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 and keep going. And that's a common thing with people with dementia. They just keep going. And after we made it back, we talked to the son about, if he wanted to take her in for medical treatment, because she had been out in the cold for hours. He indicated that the last time that she had wandered out to Larson, she ended up having some blisters on her feet and things, but she had done pretty well. And actually, she was doing pretty well given this situation. She was in good spirits and friendly, despite the fact that she had probably been walking for around 20 hours. So he was able to check into medical resources with her, and we also made a referral to APS, and he had acknowledged some of her memory issues, but he wasn't prepared to stay home with her with having to work to make sure that she was monitored. And so there was assistance given in getting her into a care facility for placement, and she had adjusted to that location actually pretty well. So this was an incident that was, these situations ended positively. There are situations that don't. And so when we respond to a situation where somebody has left, Obviously we want to do all the information gathering that we can when we first respond. We want to find out if they left on foot or in a vehicle, get a really good clothing description, get a picture if you can, make a silver alert if needed. You want to know if there are any health issues with that person that we should be aware of, and places they may go. Like I said in the first story, places they may go, a lot of times when we're dealing with like a child that has taken off, we're thinking about immediate places that are current to them and that they enjoy going. But with someone with dementia, you really want to know those historical locations, previous houses that they lived in, previous places of employment, historical places that are significant to them. And also, what's their dominant hand? Now, you may be wondering why that's of significance, but if they left on foot and they left the house, walked down the driveway, the likelihood is they turned in the direction of their dominant hand. So if it's very recent that they left, you can kind of cut down the area that they may have gone to by knowing which direction they turned out of the driveway. So that can be of significance. Next, we'll talk about a few other types of calls that we commonly respond to. First, our welfare checks. And this could be in public. Maybe somebody is acting confused or in a manner that causes concern to somebody in public, and we get called there and do an assessment. It could be at home because maybe they're acting in a different way, a different manner that isn't common to them. Or maybe someone isn't able to get a hold of that person and request a simple welfare check. An example of this would be there was a woman on the south side within the last couple of years. She was in her 90s, living by herself, didn't have any children. She had a couple nieces or nephews that were kind of nearish to the area that checked in on her and helped her with things. And they were unable to get a hold of her. Her phone wasn't working. So I responded to the address, and she was very friendly, very cordial, let me inside, chatted, wouldn't have initially thought that there was anything wrong with her. Then I asked if I could check out the phone because it wasn't coming through. And I kind of reset her router and did a couple of things with the phone, and it still wasn't working. But I noticed in walking through the kitchen of her home that there were quite a few bills on her table, and a lot of them weren't opened, and there were several of them that included her phone and cable bills. And so I asked, is it okay if I check these bills? And she was okay with that, and I found it looked like her bills had gone unpaid. And so I then asked her, is it okay if I call your cable company on your behalf, to find out what the situation is? And in talking to them, they said, yeah, we just haven't received payment. If she pays the balance, her services can immediately be turned back on. So I was like, okay. And throughout this, I was kind of talking to her and asking her different questions. And so then at that point, I asked her, hey, can you get your checkbook? All you have to do is write out this bill, and all the services can be turned back on. And it took her a while to find it. And then when she got back, she sat at the checkbook for a while before she finally said that she didn't know how to write out a check anymore. She asked if I could do that. So I got permission from a supervisor if I could assist in that way by making out the check. And so I did that. I was able to help her with getting the mail out and everything like that. And she had also in that situation discussed having lost a bunch of weight and lost a bunch of time. Like she had been in some sort of coma in her house for months. And so I talked to her about, maybe seeing a doctor and things like that. And she also had a bunch of food in her house that she didn't know where it was coming from. Clearly somebody, was bringing her food. And she had a ton of it in there. So in looking at some pictures of her in the house, it did look like she lost some weight. So it's possible that perhaps she wasn't recognizing when she was hungry, because that's another sign of dementia. At some point, you don't recognize the feeling of hunger and don't know that you need to eat. Perhaps she had also forgotten how to prepare certain meals or food. So I helped kind of get rid of the stuff in the fridge that was expired. And I ended up getting in contact with a couple of her relatives and explaining the situation that I was seeing there, and talked to them about getting her linked with a doctor and Adult Protective Services. Next, we'll talk about theft. And this is theft being that someone with dementia appears to be stealing something. So there are situations where someone with dementia may be out in a store and may take something off the shelf and not pay for it, just because their recognition of the situation has been changed or altered. They may not perceive themselves as stealing. They may think that the item is theirs. It's recognizable to them. They simply take it because there's a belief that it is theirs. So, if you get called to a situation involving an older person who's been involved in a theft and they have no history of any kind, maybe dig a little bit deeper. There, people that are older that do steal, it's possible, but recognize the fact that it's possible that it could be a symptom of dementia. So in those situations, again, try to do an assessment on that person. Ask them a variety of questions about, date and time and historical stuff. It can just be small talk just to gain an assessment of where they're at. Again, you can also talk to a relative as well to see if there's a diagnosis, because enforcement in that situation may not be appropriate. Next, we'll talk about lewd behavior. So in this situation, I'll give you an example. Let's say officers are called to a park because a male party is exposing themselves in the park and there's lots of people around. And we get there and we find out, the person is there with their spouse, and what happened was he had to go to the bathroom. The person goes to the bathroom because they don't know where the bathroom is. They just know that they have to go. They don't recognize necessarily where they are. And it wasn't an intentional act to make anyone feel uncomfortable. And so it's important to figure out the situation, make an assessment. I know that I have a relative who had gone through dementia, and when they had to go to the restroom, a lot of times they couldn't navigate their own house to get to the bathroom. So it wasn't uncommon for that person, to go to the bathroom in the closet or in the laundry basket. And it wasn't out of malice. It was just simply they didn't recognize where to get to the bathroom. And they knew they had to go. So just dig a little bit deeper in these situations as well. So in conclusion on all these calls for service, just remember, take your time, do a thorough assessment, talk to people, and make referrals when necessary.
So in part 4, we're going to be talking about the different programs that Fox Valley Memory Project offers to those living with dementia and their caregivers. So we're going to talk about community awareness of programs, educational programs for area businesses, and support and resource awareness. Some of the different programs that Fox Valley Memory Project offers is the program that Sarah and I are involved in, and that is Memory Link. We are resource navigators, and we help support people living with dementia that are still living at home within the 4-county area, which is Winnebago, Wapaka, Calumet, and Outagamie counties. We help find them resources, education, and different respite programs for people living with dementia and for their family caregivers. We also have the MindWorks, which is our respite program, where people living with dementia can come and join us for a 3-hour activity in which we also serve lunch. This allows for family members to have a little bit of time to get the things done that they need to get done, or to have that relaxation time. And it also allows those with dementia to participate in programs that are beneficial to them, and really just to socialize with others that are going through some of the same things they're going through. We help facilitate and support memory cafes throughout the Fox Valley Memory Project area. And we also do support groups for those that are taking care of someone either living at home or that have transitioned into assisted living or memory care communities. And then we also have, on a positive note, chorus, in which people with dementia and their family members can participate in together. And then this is how you can reach us by email. You can visit our website, or you could give us a call down at the bottom there, 920-225-1711. You can also refer families that you may be working with out in the community that might need some resources and support. Thank you very much for your time today, and I hope you learned something new about dementia today.